অন্যগুলা বেলায় আসলে কি লিখবো, 2-3 মার্কসের আসলে, রাইট? You just give the
It-
explanation of the uses.
আচ্ছা, দাঁড়া, আমি explanation, আমি ইউজের নোটটা বের করি, তাহলে ওখান থেকে আমার কথা বলতে সুবিধা হবে, কারণ সবগুলো মুখস্থ নাই অনেস্টলি। সো তাহলে ওখান থেকে আমি তোমার ইজিলি ট্র্যাক দিতে পারবো। জাস্ট এ সেকেন্ড, বের করতেছি আমি। এটা মনে করি জোফিয়াম স্পেকট্রামের নোটস। গামা রেজ এখানে দেখো, গামা রেজ এর বেনিফিট হচ্ছে, this is done by applying constant gamma rays on a cancer tumor. The energy contains gamma rays is absorbed by the cells and get destroyed. Some healthy cells actually absorb collateral damage. So এটা হচ্ছে explanation. Sterilization কিভাবে হয়, sterilize medical equipment, etc. It is possible because gamma rays can kill germs and has high penetrating power. High penetrating power মানে হচ্ছে, মনে করো তুমি let's say you have a tray of medical equipment, so they are overlapping scissors and tweezers and other stuffs. You cannot only kill the, you shouldn't only kill the germs on the top surface. You should be killing the germs on throughout the equipment. That's why gamma ray is more useful, because they can paint it to metals and kill the germs everywhere. Then crystal spectrography to see the structure of the various crystals and mineralized. The amount of information that you have within this paper, within the bracket, is the maximum amount of information that you need to know for that part. In some of these explanations, they are only telling you what is done. In few of these explanations, they are also telling why it is possible. And you don't need to know more than this for your syllabus volume. That's why I wrote all these stuffs in this manner with some square brackets.
Yes, sir. Which is it. Thank you, sir.
আচ্ছা, এগুলো একটু পড়ে দেখো। যদি কোনো পার্টের তো কোনো সমস্যা থাকে, ইউ ক্যান অলসো আস্ক মি স্পেসিফিক কোশ্চেন, স্যার এই এক্স এর অত নাম্বারটা বুঝি নাই, বা ইনফ্রারেড এর এত নাম্বারটা বুঝি নাই, বুঝাই দিব, কোনো সমস্যা নেই। আচ্ছা, এরপরে হচ্ছে useful একটা question is, while measuring the length of a pendulum, we will take the reading from the point of the string is attached with the clamp to the center of the pendulum. Yes, Yusuf, the answer to this question is yes. Also, I didn't understand the answer of question number 63. কোন পেপারে 63 বাবা?
সরি স্যার, এটা একটা ভিডিও থেকে আই গেস দেখতেছিলাম স্যার ওইটা।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, সমস্যা। আচ্ছা, চন্দ্রিমা একটা কোশ্চেন দিচ্ছে হচ্ছে গলিফ ইলেকট্রোস্কোপ। চন্দ্রিমা তুমি
স্যার
গলিফ,
মনে নেই স্যার, এটা একটু গেস বলতে পারবো না স্যার।
আচ্ছা সমস্যা নেই, ভাই একজনের করে রেসপন্ড করো। চন্দ্রিমা, গলিফ ইলেকট্রোস্কোপের কোন পার্টটা বুঝছো না আমাকে বলো।
চার্জ ডিটেকশনের পার্টটা।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, জাস্ট এ সেকেন্ড, আমি দেখে তোমাকে দেখাই দিচ্ছি, 1 মিনিট। সিলেবাস, আচ্ছা, ইউ মাইট ওয়ান্ডার গলিফ ইলেকট্রোস্কোপ থেকে আমি এখানে কেন আসলাম, কারণ এখান থেকে আমি তোমাকে একটা জিনিস দেখাতে যাচ্ছি, দেখায় তারপর আমি আর তোমাকে গলিফ ইলেকট্রোস্কোপ বলবো, ডোন্ট ওয়ারি অ্যাবাউট দ্যাট।
মানে স্যার গোল্ড লিফ ইলেকট্রোস্কোপ নাই স্যার, এই জন্য।
না থাকলে আমি বলবো, সমস্যা নাই, নাই যে সেই জিনিসটা দেখানোর জন্য এখানে আসছি, যতটুকু আমার মনে আছে এটা নাই, বাট আই ওয়ান্ট টু শো দ্যাট ফর পিস অফ মাইন্ড। আচ্ছা, স্ট্যাটিসটিক্সে কি কি আছে আমরা একটু খেয়াল করি। এখানে আছে হচ্ছে describe the experience by fiction, explain that the charging source involves movement of electrons, state that there are positive negative charges and the charge is measured in coulombs, state that unlike charges attract and like charges repel, so you have to know this information. Describe an electric field as a region in which the electric charge experiences a force. State the direction of the lines of force and describe simple field patterns. Simple field pattern মানে হচ্ছে তোমাদের ক্লাস ক্লাসে যেগুলো দেখাইছিলাম, ক্লাস তোমাদেরকে দেখায়নি, সরি, মানে তোমাদের যে ফিল্ড গুলো আছে, যে সিঙ্গেল পজিটিভ চার্জ কেমন হয়, নেগেটিভ চার্জ কেমন হয়, দুটো পজিটিভ চার্জ পাশাপাশি থাকলে কেমন হয়, দুটো নেগেটিভ চার্জ পাশাপাশি থাকলে কেমন হয়, এইসব ভাবি যাবে। Discuss the separation of charges by induction. We know this. Discuss difference between electrical conductors and insulators and state examples of each. That's just what is it. State what is meant by earthing charge object. Describe examples where charging could be a problem. Example, lightning. You can see this is example lightning. So there can be other stuffs as well. For example, lightning is a problem. The likelihood of gas explosion in refueling stations can be a problem. Then static shocks from TV screens or during the winter from your clothes can be also a problem. So it's not actually a problem, but it's irritating, to be honest. To say examples where charging is helpful, photocopier, electricity, refrigerator. So we know the steps, and that's basically it. What these people did, they actually discarded the whole idea of polyglotoscope out of this whole thing. which might be actually mentioned over here in the last part of the whole thing. Let me just have a quick look. আমি তারপর তোমার কোশ্চেন আনসার দিব, সো ডোন্ট ওয়ারি দ্যাট আমি এটা তোমাদেরকে কোশ্চেন স্কিপ করার জন্য বলতেছি, নো। কোথায় গেল, কোথায় গেল? ভুলে যাই সবকিছু, বয়স হয়ে গেছে আমার। কোন ইয়ারে যেটা ছিল এটা আমি ভুলে গেছি। What I'm looking for a very specific page where it says that the electroscope discussion has been discarded from the syllabus. There is a certain syllabus in which there is a certain line. I was trying to find that out, but as you can see, I couldn't. Anyway, I'll still help you to understand this thing because I find it important for you to understand. Because if the basic thing is not difficult, so I'll help you. The first thing that you need to understand that the Golgi filtroscope is very much like a metal body. It has a disc on the top. This is the side view of the disc. That's what's like a rectangle. A metal shaft comes out of it, and at the bottom of the shaft, either there can be two leaves, or in some cases, there can be one rod, half rod, and there can be only one leaf. So you can have both of these. If there is a rod, then this rod part is never going to move, and only the leaf is going to move left and right. If you have two leaves, then both of them can move. So both of the designs are possible. What you simply need to judge that this whole metal object needs to be considered as to have two ends. One is the upper end, one is the lower end. This is the first part you need to understand, not laterally, but vertically, not horizontally, vertically, the top part and the bottom part. So the idea is that whenever we have a Golgi filtroscope like this, which is neutral, so I'm going to need this a lot. So let me just make a lot of copies over here, and I'm going to be using each of these for multiple discussions, no problem. অনেকগুলো কপি করে নিলাম যাতে করে আলাপ করতে পারি। I'm going to change what is over here every once in a while. So let's say for a neutral Golgi filtroscope, the gap is quite small. So let's say for a neutral Golgi filtroscope, we have gaps like this. Between two leaves, we have a very small gap. They're really close to each other because there is no force, there is no repulsion. Now, if we bring a known charged object over here, let's say we are going to bring a positively charged object, a glass rod that was rubbed with silk, and we bring that glass rod close to the plate, not touching it, bring close. Because of induction, this part will have electrons, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there'll be equal amount of positive charges produced over here. So yes.
Sir, এই এক্সপ্লেনেশনটা যে the electrons are attracted to the positive charge.
Yes.
Sir, এটা আমরা বলতে পারি the মানে positive charge is repelled. কোনটা appropriate?
Whenever you are trying to explain the charging process, the moment you are trying to refer to movement of particles, you should always mention electrons.
Sir, protons বা positive charge-টা mention করুন।
না, positive charge তোমরা কখনোই mention করবে না. What you can say, I mean, if I was writing the explanation, I would write it this way. As the positive charge glass rod is brought closer to the disc of the Golgi filtroscope, electrons get attracted to the positive charge, and they rise up through the shaft and reach to the disc, leaving positive charge at the bottom. Do I make sense?
Yes, sir.
So movement will be always explained in terms of electrons, and whatever from the location where the electrons are moving away, that location will become positively charged. The location where they are moving to, that location will become negatively charged. That's the way it is. Clear?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা, so এটা হলো, তাহলে এটা হলে কি হবে, এখান থেকে আমাদের গ্যাপটা তাহলে বড় হবে। So let's say this is the current situation. So I'm gonna copy paste this thing as well. So we have this whole thing. Oops, we have this whole thing over here. So we have all the negative charges as well, and here we have a bit of a more gap. So the gaps have increased because of like charges repel. So because of the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6, okay, whatever identical figures. So this gap increase represents that there are some charge over here. So whenever you can see that the gaps of the Goldberg scope is increasing, when you bring an unknown object, if this object was unknown, if this object was unknown, if you bring an unknown object close to the collimator scope and you see the gaps are increasing, then you would know that this is charged. This is possible by being a positively charged object, or it is also possible by being a negatively charged object. If you bring an ebonite rod that was earlier rubbed by far, then the ebonite rod was negatively charged. In this case, this ebonite rod will repel the electrons down. As a result, the lower part will become negatively charged, and the top part will be left with positive charge. So once again, the gaps will increase. So if you have a neutral collimator and you bring an unknown object close to the collimator, you see the gap increase, you can decide there is charge in the unknown object. This is only detection of charge, not determining the type of charge. This is possible for both type of charges. এটা বুঝা গেছে?
Yes, sir.
আচ্ছা। Second scenario হচ্ছে, let's say we now want to determine the type of charge. To determine the type of charge, first we have to charge the collimator itself in a known charge type. How? Very simple. You just do this. Let's say this is a collimator which was initially neutral, so it was neutral. If you wonder that how are we going to get a neutral collimator? Well, the easiest way to make neutral something is that you touch it by your bare hands. You are going to work as a ground. Whatever charge is over here is going to be discharged. Or you can actually use a ground connection and actually make the contact over here. That can also work. But touching is the very simple and easy way that we recommend, because you're not going to get a shock out of it anyway, and it works just fine. So so first you have a neutral collimator, and then you're going to bring a known charge object. This is the important thing. How do you get a known charge object? By remembering this pair, that ebonite far is one pair and glass and silk are another pair. How do you remember this thing? By an easy thing, that EFGS, not H but S. So EFGS gives you the whole pair thing. Ebonite with far, glass with silk. So if you rub ebonite with far, you're gonna get minus plus. If you rub glass with silk, you're gonna get plus and minus. So that's the thing you have to remember / memorize. So if you want to bring a positively charged rod over here, you're gonna bring up our glass rod, which was earlier rubbed by silk. If you want to bring a negatively charged rod over here, you're gonna use a ebonite rod that was earlier rubbed by far. So important information: we have to bring known charged object to this neutral collimator. That's very important. So let's say we have now brought the known charged object. Let's say this was positive charged object. Essentially, this will attract all the electrons over here, 1 2 3 4 5 6 maybe, and then we're going to have positive charges over here. Now what you have to understand, these far charges are what we call the free charges, and these close charges are what we call the fixed charges. Because as long as this thing is present here, these negative charges cannot go anywhere, because they are attracted and they're stuck over here because of their attraction. They cannot go anywhere, which means there is no way we can neutralize these negative charges. However, if we now touch this thing, let me just copy this whole thing and paste it over here. This whole thing was not needed, so we just select this whole thing. So now if we just touch this thing, let's say I'm going to touch it right over here, what's going to happen? You can touch this thing anywhere. That really doesn't matter. You can actually connect ground connections anywhere. That touch will not neutralize these negative charges. However, your finger is simply going to give some electrons into this plate, because this whole thing, this top plate cannot be discharged. What can be discharged is this lower part. To neutralize this part or to discharge this part, we need to take electrons out from the outside, so that all of these positive charges can be neutralized. So whenever we're going to touch, this charge will neutralize, and as a result, electrons will get in. As a result, these gaps will gonna become normal once again. So you're not gonna have a wide gap; they're gonna be really close to each other, and you are going to have this thing. So, and you're gonna have positive charges over here, like earlier. And let's say you now have six negative charges stored over here. Now, before you move this one, you have to first move your finger away so that you disconnect the ground connection. The reason we're moving the fingers away is because we don't want these electrons to escape. We want these electrons to stay over here. So we first remove the finger. As we remove the finger, now we can say this whole thing is now charged, actually charged, because now there is altogether more electrons compared to the number of protons, because some electrons just entered this thing from my finger. So now you can take this object away, and then these electrons, extra electrons, are going to redistribute themselves evenly. And let's say I'm going to draw, let's say, 3 negative charges over here, and maybe 3 negative charges over here. And that will leave these two leaves with some gap. You'll be able to see that whatever the amount of small gap that you had when it was neutral altogether, for example, a situation like this, here there would be some more bigger gap, proving that currently the Goldie filtroscope has some charge. And because you knew that the brought in object was positively charged, you know for a fact now the gold leaf is charged in negative charges. এই পার্ট পর্যন্ত বোঝা গেছে কিনা? This thing looks like a T-bone steak.
Yes, sir.
So, and vice versa, if you want to charge a gold leaf by positive charges, we simply have to bring some negatively charged rod over here, ebonite rod rub with far. So that's gonna push the electrons down, and the plate is going to be left with positive charges. If you touch, those electrons are going to climb up through this rod and go to your body. So your body is going to absorb all the extra electrons to make the lower part discharge. So every single time you do the ground connection, the leaves are going to be discharged, not the plate. So that way you can do this. So এটা গেল হচ্ছে how we can charge this thing. And the last thing is that how we can do the detection. For that part, what we're going to need, let's say we have the Goldie filtroscope. I want to copy this. Let's say we have the Goldie filtroscope. আমার পিচ্ছি আউ আউ করে।
স্যার কেমন আছে আপনার বেবিটা?
ভালো, আলহামদুলিল্লাহ। খাওয়া দাওয়া করে, আর কাপড় ভিজা ফেললে চেঁচামেচি করে, তখন কাপড় চেঞ্জ করে দেওয়া, চেঁচামেচি বন্ধ করে। আর মাকে 2-3 মিনিট না দেখলে চেঁচামেচি করে। এখন আমি তাকে আমার পাক্কা ভক্ত বানাতে পারিনি, সময় লাগবে। I'm working towards that. Anyway, so let's say we have a Goldie filtroscope which is now currently charged. Let's say this Goldie filtroscope is now negatively charged. So there is a bit of a gap between the two leaves. This is not neutral. There is a gap. Now we want to detect the type of charge within an unknown object. Let's say this is the unknown object. We're going to bring it close. If we bring it close, there can be two behavior that can happen over here. Think about it. What is the behavior? Either the gaps can decrease or the gaps can increase. These are the only two behaviors you could possibly expect over here. If you wonder why couldn't the gap could be the same, the gap can never be the same, because I'm going to explain why the gaps can never be the same. Now let's try to understand the only three. I mean, what is the possible charge type of this unknown object? I mean, what are the types distribution of this unknown object? This object could be positively charged. I'm talking about the possibility. This object could be negatively charged. This object could be neutral. So let's say nuclear is directed by 0. So it could be plus, it could be minus, or it could be 0. So let's check the options. If this object is positively charged, it will attract further electrons to the top, which means more electrons have to rise upwards. So here the electron concentration will increase, and here the electron concentration will decrease. This will still be negatively charged, but not as much as earlier. So it will be less negatively charged, which means the gap will decrease. If you see the gap decrease, that means that this unknown object can be positively charged.
Yes, sir.
Second scenario, let's say we have once again, oops. তোমাদের একটা মজার জিনিস বলি। I mean, it's pretty interesting. And I find it really interesting. I mean, we live in a small world in that sense, interesting. আমি এখন জাকিরশন রোডে যে বাসাটা ভাড়া নিছি, এই বাসাটার ওনার হচ্ছে জেএমবি স্যার।
Yes, sir.
জাহাঙ্গীর স্যার, জাহাঙ্গীর মাসুদ বাদশা স্যার।
স্যার আপনি কি basically now his neighbor?
No. He lives in Janmia housing. I live in the house that he owns in Zakirushan Road, so I'm his tenant.
Very interesting.
Yeah, small world. I mean, we used to to see them. We're like, wow. Acha. The next thing that can happen is that the unknown object might also be negatively charged. So let's say I'm gonna draw this object over here. Let's say this was the initially negatively charged object. We have 4 negative charges over here, 4 negative charges over here. So if the unknown object is negatively charged, so if this was an object negatively charged, then this is going to repel some electrons from here, and electrons are going to be pushed down. So you will have now less negative charge on the plate. Let's say I'm going to rub off 2, and you're going to have more negative charge at the bottom, which means now there'll be stronger repulsion, so your gap will increase. So if gap increases, this unknown object had to be negative charge. So what you can decide from these two observations?
আচ্ছা স্যার,
Excellent.
উপরে নেগেটিভ চার্জ থাকলে নিচে কেন নেগেটিভ চার্জ থাকবে গোল্ডিফ ইলেকট্রোডে?
Because the electroscope was charged previously in the negative charge, and we knew that the Golgi electroscope was charged in negative charge, which I discussed right in here. And when we bring this object, that shifted those charge particles to one direction more compared to the other. বুঝছো?
I mean, I
Yes.
understood that the down part would be negative, but মানে উপরের প্লেটটা স্যার ওইটা তো পজিটিভ হবে না, or
No.
something like that.
Here's the thing that you need to understand. We are bringing this negatively charged object close to the plate. We are definitely not touching it. How close are you bringing it will practically determine how much repulsion are you going to apply on the free electrons over here. The closer you bring this to this thing, more electrons will be pushed down. But for the sake of easier and typical scenario, this thing will not become positively charged, because just because this is a negatively charged object, I mean, this thing could become a positive charged object. But if you want to make the plate positively charged, then this object has to be really strongly negatively charged, and it has to be brought really close, which is typically not achieved in a laboratory experiment. So what is the most likely scenario? The way we prefer to explain this is that electrons are going to flow downwards, so the lower part will become more negatively charged, and the top part will become less negatively charged. I mean, if you ask me, can the plate become positively charged? Yes. Can the plate be exactly neutral? Yes. Are they likely to happen? Not so much. বুঝছো কি বলছি?
আচ্ছা স্যার, বুঝেছি স্যার।
Good. So what we can see over here for these two observations, that if we have gap decrease, আচ্ছা এটা মুছে দেই কারণ এটা actually আমাদের বোঝানোর জন্য লিখছি। If we have gap decrease, the Golgi filtroscope charge and the unknown object charge are opposite. And if we have gap increase, then the Golgi filtroscope charge and the unknown object charge are same. এই পর্যন্ত বোঝা গেছে কিনা?
Yes, sir.
There is a confusing third case. Confusing third case হচ্ছে এরকম. Let's say the Golgi filtroscope was initially negatively charged. So I'm going to give, let's say, 4 negative charge on the plate and 4 negative charges at the leaves. Let's see if the unknown object was neutral, for example. Now, neutral objects gives a pretty interesting behavior. What is going to happen over here is called mutual induction. Mutual induction means if this unknown object is neutral, then whenever we'll bring this object close, these negative charges on the plate, they are going to induce this thing. And because of the induction, on this side, we're going to have some positive charges and we're going to have equal negative charges over here. Do you understand this part?
Yes, sir. Induction হবে।
Induction হবে. Now, এখন দেখো, এই ইলেকট্রনগুলোকে রিপেল করবে। These electrons are going to repel these electrons, but these positive charges are going to attract these electrons. Because the positive charges are closer, this attraction will be stronger compared to the repulsion of these electrons, because these electrons are further away. You have to understand this thing. This rod is doing the attraction and repulsion both, but it is attracting more compared to its repelling. Does this make sense? This is because of distance. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. মানে
No,
attract
sir.
force-টা বেশি।
These positive charges are closer to the plates. You should back. So they will attract these electrons more strongly compared to the amount of repulsion that this end's negative charge will do on them. I mean, these negative charges are repelling them to go down. These positive charges are attracting these electrons to stay up. But whose force would be bigger?
The one which is closer, sir.
That's precisely what I'm saying. Which means in this case, this will become victorious, or so it will attract more electrons to the plate. So electrons are going to practically rise up, and the top plate is going to become more negatively charged, and it is going to become less negative charge on the bottom, which means gap will decrease. So this is a confusing situation. So gap is decreasing. So what we can see, decreasing gap can also give us, I mean, neutral object can also give us decreasing gap. Opposite charge can also give us decreasing gap. So decreasing gap observation can have two equivocal meaning or two alternate meaning. We cannot decide what, because the goldilocks cannot tell you what type of charge is the other object. You just have to observe what's happening to those plates. If you see the gap decreasing, it proves that the unknown object might be oppositely charged or the unknown object might be neutral. So to determine a single decision, it is always recommended that we should prepare or redo the whole experiment or redo more steps, so that our final observation is always gap increase. If the gap is seen to increase with appropriate steps of procedure, then you can always be sure of a single decision that the type of charge of the Golgi fluoroscope and the type of charge of the rod, they are both exactly same. এই পর্যন্ত বুঝা গেছে?
Yes, sir.
এইটুকুই হচ্ছে Golgi fluoroscope কাহিনী, আর কোনো কাহিনী নেই।
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Acha. In Rectification lecture 3, 29, write an answer why would the electron and the nucleus repel each other as the distance between the electron and atom increases. What? Did I say they will repel? You see what I was saying? Did I just mess up the whole physics?
I mean, I think I was just watching the videos and immediately texting.
Relative lecture 3, কই সেটা? আচ্ছা, ও তো উপরের দিকে থাকবে। সে কি? এভাবে এরকম অলপ অলপ কেন? আচ্ছা, ঠিকই তো আছে। থামা করছি পরে lecture 3, 2951, 20
আচ্ছা স্যার, আরেকটা কোশ্চেন স্যার, আমরা মানে সিআরওটা কোনটা থেকে শুরু করেছিলাম?
একটা করে বলি, একটু দাঁড়াও, মাথায় রাখো।
Oppositely charged, and as the distance between those two oppositely charged particles increase, they basically work against the inherent attraction between themselves, pretty much like the idea of GP. If you take an object further away from the earth, you increase the GP because you're working against the gravitational force. In the same way, if you are taking that electron away from
I never said they're going to repel each other. I said that whenever the electron is taken further away from the nucleus, we have to work against, or some external entity has to work against the attraction that exists between the nucleus and the electron. That will increase the energy of the electron in form of potential energy. The similar example that I brought in is that a similar example can be for the case of GP, which is easily understandable. If you hold an object close to the Earth's surface, it has a certain amount of GP. If you want to increase the GP, you have to push against the weight upwards and make the separation between the Earth and that object larger. That bigger separation will give that object a bigger amount of GP. So that's what I say. বুঝছো?
I think so, sir.
Okay, beautiful. Then you say in the same video, right before 31, the rocket assemble the remain the rocket initially have to produce a large amount of thrust in order to separate its huge body from the ground and the atmosphere. And once it's started, it will turn off its engine, the rocket will automatically move in the same direction as there is no repulsive force, but as it is still near the Earth will keep on uh, pulling it like a material, so its speed will decrease, but in a decreasing manner. So the rocket is moving as the rocket is moving away from the Earth. What? আচ্ছা দাঁড়াও বাই করতেছি 3131. Okay, we're here.
Yes, sir. And আচ্ছা স্যার আরেকটা পয়েন্ট, গ্র্যাভিটেশন মানে ইলেকট্রোস্ট্যাটিক পোটেনশিয়াল এনার্জি যেভাবে বাড়তে থাকে, the attraction between those two charged particles reduce, therefore ইলেকট্রনের স্পিড তো আস্তে আস্তে বাড়তে থাকে, সো আমরা এটা বলতে পারি না যে কাইনেটিক এনার্জি ইনক্রিজেস জিপি
ইলেকট্রন স্পিড বাড়তে থাকে না, ইলেকট্রনের স্পিডটা কমতে থাকে। লেটস সে the electron was liberated from that, let's say from that 2 joule of energy, electron was liberated using 2 joule, and it's going to have some very small amount of kinetic energy by which it will start the journey away from the remnant positive ion. So as it goes further, the force will decrease, but the speed will also decrease, because the pull will be always working towards that positive ion. So it's the same thing that if you shoot a rocket at a pretty high speed from the ground, as it goes up, it does not speed up. It essentially does what?
slows down.
That's what happens.
The
It gets
electrostatic-
further, but it slows down.
So its speed reduces at a reducing rate.
Yeah, exactly. I'd put it that way. Perfect. Ryan, did I answer?
Okay, I got the context. Yeah, কি বলছো আমাকে? The question is that so its speed will decrease, but in a decreasing manner as the rocket is moving out from that. The answer to your question that you have asked over here, Yusuf, is yes. বুঝছো?
না স্যার,
When you asked a question over here, the answer to this question is yes. So what you wrote over here, so that like over here that if they shut off their engine and it is getting further from the Earth, and we consider this system as an accelerated system, as it goes further from the Earth, it will slowly slow down, because as it is going away, it is continuously working against the attraction force between them. So Earth is trying to pull it closer, but it is going further away, which means it is increasing GP. That GP has to come from somewhere, because energy is indestructible or non-creatable. So the K of the object will slowly start to convert to that GP, which means the object has to slow down.
স্যার আই গেস আপনার ভয়েসটা ল্যাগিং করছে।
Is it? বাকিরা কি ঠিক মতো শুনতেছো?
আচ্ছা এখন ঠিক আছে স্যার।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, সমস্যা নেই। I actually replaced my microphone to a new position. বুঝে গেছে কি? I hope so. Saina asked me a question, how to draw the curve of best fit. Saina, আমি এই জিনিসটা তোমাকে দেখাবো।
Answer your question.
I have a very good video for the curve of best fit in here. I'm going to show you through a video of this thing other than drawing this whole stuff. Then if you have any question, I'll pick up that question. Don't worry. Saina, আসো।
জি স্যার।
Okay, একটু ওয়েট করো বাবা, দেখাচ্ছি আমি তোমাকে।
জি স্যার বুঝে গেছে।
Wait. Did you ask me how to do the curve of best fit or how to do the tangent to a curve? Curve of best fit.
Curve of best fit.
আচ্ছা তাহলে এটা না, sorry, I misinterpreted your question. I misread it. Sorry, দেখাচ্ছি। Curve of best fit, there can be a lot of different ways to draw the curve of best fit. One of the easiest way to draw the curve of best fit is to buy some French curve. You can actually bring them in your exam hall. They are allowed equipments. If you buy these stuffs, you don't have to buy all of them. You can buy some of them, but they can prove to be pretty useful to draw curves. You just trial and error to find out that which of these sides actually matches with your requirement, and then you just draw.
Sir, is this actually allowed in an exam?
Yes, it's an allowed equipment. Some of my students did it. So you can, I mean, this is just an equipment. This is a ruler. This is an alternative version of ruler. Other people might not have it, but
Sir,
there is
is
no
this available in
rule.
Bangladesh?
There is no rule that says that you cannot use it. Okay, so that's one easy way to do this, Sarina. But the most, this is not recommended. I don't recommend this, but the reason I'm showing you first to tell you that it is a possible way, and my students have done this earlier, and they were not prohibited to use it, because it's not cheating to use this thick equipment. It's just, I would say, it's a smart thing that someone became more prepared than others for their upcoming exam. That's how I would put it. So
Sir, is this available in Bangladesh?
yes.
দারাজে বাবা
Oh yeah. দারাজে অনেক কিছুই পাওয়া যায়, but
But be
chips from
very,
forest.
but be very careful to browse, but that is too much, because they start giving out ads which can get really weird at times. Let's not get there. So how to do the curve of best fit? So let me pull up a simple example for this one. Let's say this is our graph system. We don't need those two lines, so let me just erase those. I'll erase those lines. Drawing two straight lines is pretty difficult over here. I have to really point my mouse, but drawing a rectangle and then deleting these two sides is a very easy way, which I found out very recently. One of my student from other batch actually recommended. So you do this, you don't have to bother. I was like, wow. Okay, here's the deal. Let's say you have plotted some points which look like this. Okay, let's say I've plotted some points which look like this. Now you can see that this should be a base curve is going to be a decreasing gradient curve like this. The way, I mean, the idea of a base fit curve is always that you are going to put, you are going to draw a curve so that your curve agrees with the points. Agreeing with the points mean that you do not have more than one difference on either side of the curve. So you can have one dot on one side and you can have two dots on the other side, or you can have equal dots on both sides. But the difference of the numbers, difference between the numbers of dots on two sides cannot be more than one. For example, you cannot have three dots falling on the curve, one dot existing on the top, and three more on the bottom. That would be wrong. You need to balance that out. So my recommended way to draw a curve is that first, whenever you have plotted this point, you rotate your paper. Actually, I have to, let me copy this and let's try paint 3D. New. Yeah, sure, something went wrong. Dump. Why can't I paste stuff over here? Should I use snipping tool? Would that help? Oh, yeah. So let's say this is your piece of paper that you have, and here you have plotted this point. I want to place your wrist somewhere around here, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to assume that my wrist is placed over here, and I'm gonna try to go in my natural movement. So the natural movement of my right hand wrist is from wrist to the right direction. So let's say I'm going to place my wrist over here. So I'm going to try to place my wrist somewhere over here, and I'm not going to get fixated on this position. I'm going to try to move my finger pretty close to these points, but not actually drawing this line. So I'm just gonna, fake draw these lines with keeping about 1 or 2 millimeter distance from the page. And I'm gonna try to adjust my hand movement and the position of my wrist so that I can get a pretty good convincing curve out on my fingertips. So by the time you are trying to adjust this, your muscle memory will build up and you will know precisely how to move your finger. I mean, you have to understand that whenever you're rotating your arm, there are multiple motions. You are actually rotating your hand around your wrist, then your fingers can push the pen out, or fingers can push the pencil in. So these two movements will practically decide the shape of the curve. So you pick up that muscle memory. It doesn't really take that long. I mean, 30 seconds, 1 minute is good enough. And then once you are convinced of this thing, draw a pretty light line over these points, and then you judge that am I okay with this curved line. If you're okay, make it dark. If you're not okay, slightly erase the part that you're not okay with, draw it again. This is the one thing. The other thing that is important, that whenever you are drawing this curve, I mean, this is for practice. If you don't want to do this, while you are going from here to here, I mean, you will know where the point is, but as you are approaching this point, you need to look over here. So let's say you start over here, you know that you're going this way, so you know that I have to go downward right. But you should look at both of these points in such a way that whenever you are, let's say I would like to choose a smaller thickness, let's say a bit smaller thickness. It once again become large. Okay. Not 1 pixel, 3 pixel maybe. So let's say you are gonna start from here. Now try to look at both of the points so that whenever you reach this point, you don't make a king to reach that other point. I mean, drawing a proper curve through this point might actually it's difficult. So if okay, I cannot actually, can I?
স্যার আপনি কি একটু ভিডিওটা অন করে তারপরে বুঝাতে পারবেন স্যার?
Good.
What?
So we started the recording.
Hello?
In our last class, we did talk about how
আপনি কি
how
ভিডিওটা অন করে একটু বুঝাতে
to
পারবেন?
how do you perceive
exactly what I
the
just
curvature
I was
in
about
terms
to
of
do
the power
earlier,
of y and
and I
power
want
of
to select
x.
this.
So what does that mean?
I cannot.
Videos are running at a
I want to
just
start
select
with how do we deal with gradient?
Skip,
How do you calculate the
select.
gradient for any line?
And rotate.
Let me show you a simple
And
procedure
rotate
for
this.
this. Let's say we want to measure the gradient or slope value for a certain line. How do you do that?
এটাকে রোটেট করে কেমনে?
So let's say these are x-axis and y-axis. We have a straight line that looks like, let's say,
আচ্ছা,
this.
মনে করো আমি এটাকে ঘুরাইতেছি।
So let's say we want to
আকার
measure
সুবিধার
the
জন্য
gradient of this
আমি
line.
এটাকে ঘুরাই এই
On the simple way,
আমার
if you ever have access to a given straight
স্যার
line,
আপনার মনে একটা ভিডিও অন করা স্যার। Background noise আসছে।
you are expected to draw a triangle on your graph. I mean, you can calculate the gradient without drawing the triangle, because in our last class, as we have seen, that if we know coordinate of two different points, let's say if we know the coordinate of two different points, you can essentially go for x2 minus y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus
So
x1
let's say
for
I'm
your
gonna
equation.
try
Also,
to
what we wrote in the last class, I'm going to rewrite it again.
and
M equals to y2 minus y1 divided by
so
x2
this is the
minus
curve that I
x1.
want.
That
So
can be
I'm
one equation, or
actually
vice
trying
versa.
to
I can also
get my
flip
hand
it.
movement to its points.
Y2 y1 minus y2 divided by x1 minus
concept
x1.
of this. So
So mathematically, it's possible to
that.
calculate the gradient by only the coordinate values if you want.
Shafat, একটু wait করো, তোমার কোশ্চেন নিচ্ছি. This will work. So I'm going to draw a pretty light line through them.
Are you তোমার কি volume সমস্যা হচ্ছে?
Are you okay with this? You have 2 points on the top, 1 point on the bottom.
একটু জোরে কথা বলুন।
I'm not usually okay with this. I
I'm
would
pretty much
appreciate this
talking
line
the
going
regular
a little
voice
bit
that I
up,
usually
because
talk through.
the gap over here is too big. The gap over here is a bit less. So let's erase this part.
আমার কাছে একটু আস্তে
A couple
লাগতেছে।
of more times. Sir, হ্যাঁ, সাদমান বলো।
Are you using any tab or in computer?
I'm using computer and I've also maxed out my
Annotation
ঠিক
করতেছিল
আছে,
কে?
আমি তোমাকে একটা সিম্পল জিনিস
So
দেখাবো।
now I
মনে
have
হচ্ছে স্যার আপনি মনে হচ্ছে ইউটিউবে কোনো ভিডিও অন করে গেছেন স্যার।
আগে দেখো তারপর করো।
I'm happy
If
with
you
this
go into your
stuff. Now what I'm
speakers,
going to do, and now
you
I'm
see
going
it?
to make it darker.
Okay, if you right click on the speaker icon,
বুঝছো কি আমি
open
কি
volume
করছি এখানে?
mixer.
I mean,
no not volume
building up that
mixer,
hand movement is what makes
কোনটা
your
জানি
curve
কালকে?
look good.
Open sound settings, and then your speakers should
China,
be
বুঝা গেছে?
found here.
Yes, sir.
Go in the
বুঝেছি।
device properties,
Hello.
additional device properties.
Yes, sir. I understood.
You go here, have a look. If you go in the enhance
Sir.
button, have this one clicked. Loudness equalization should be clicked on, and then apply and okay, and then get out of it. You take this out.
কেউ নাই?
জি স্যার।
করতে পারছো?
Yes, sir.
ভলিউম বাড়ছে?
হ্যাঁ স্যার পারছেন।
Yep. Okay, that should help. So,
Sorry,
getting back
I
to the whole point,
mistakenly muted
Tasmin
my.
Fariha, তুমি জিজ্ঞেস করছো what is the topic?
I mistakenly did mute my right pad. আমি এতক্ষণ যে কথাবার্তাগুলো বলছি তোমরা এই কথাবার্তা শুনছো?
স্যার অনেক ওভারল্যাপ
স্যার
করছে।
অনেক কিছু শুনছি বাট কিছু বুঝতে পারি নাই স্যার।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে আমি আবার বলতেছি। আচ্ছা আরেকবার বলতেছি, সরি আমি সামহাও আমার রাইট প্যাডে কোন একটা বাটন লেগে আমার মিউট হয়ে গেছিল। আচ্ছা আমি এটা পজ করছি বলতেছি। আচ্ছা ওই জন্য আমাকে সাফাত লিখতেছিল যে আরে স্যার আচ্ছা আই এম রিয়েলি সরি সাফাত, থ্যাংক ইউ ফর দ্য হেল্প তো, বাট আচ্ছা আমি বলতেছি আমি এখানে কি করছি বলতেছি। I rotated my copy. I'm trying to place my wrist somewhere over here and trying to make this hand movement to satisfy that whether I'm getting a good hand movement. So two things are in effect: my wrist movement and my fingers movement. My fingers movement are gonna make the pen move like this, and my wrist movement is gonna make the pen move like this. So you have to adjust these two things to get a good feel of the curve. Once you try this, let's say multiple times, and in the same direction, in the same direction, then you can essentially try to draw a thin line. So I actually draw a thin line earlier, but I was not okay with it. I could think I could do better. So then I rubbed it off. I actually did Ctrl Z, and then I tried to draw this one, and this one is coming out better because now I can see 2 points on the bottom, 2 points on the top, one going through the curve. It looks better. So I'm gonna now make this darker and gonna go ahead with my answering.
So sir, it doesn't matter whether it crosses everything, but points at both sides of the curve must be equal.
Preferably equal, but the difference shouldn't be more than one. That's the rule of thumb.
Okay.
সাইনা বুঝছো কি এই জিনিসটা?
জি স্যার বুঝেছি।
Sure, thank you. It was a good question actually. এটা এই জিনিসটা জানা দরকার কারণ পেপার 4 এ কিছু কার্ভ আসে আর কার্ভ আঁকতে না পারলে আসলে তখন খুব ভেজাল লাগে। কার্ভের আঁকার জন্য কয়েকটা জিনিস বলে দেই, সেটা হচ্ছে কার্ভের কয়েকটা প্রপার্টি কখনোই থাকতে পারবে না। কার্ভ শুড নট হ্যাভ কিঙ্কস। দিস ইজ হোয়াট উই কল এ কিঙ্ক। মনে করো একটা কার্ভ আঁকতেছো, কার্ভের মধ্যে এরকম একটা পয়েন্ট পাওয়া গেল, অ্যাকচুয়ালি এটা কিঙ্ক হয় না, মনে করো এরকম এরকম। দিস ইজ হোয়াট উই কল এ কিঙ্ক ইন এ কার্ভ। Kink means there is a rapid change of curvature. Curve should be smooth. It can have really sharp edges like this, but it should not have like this. This is a kink. This is not. This is a smooth curve. This is not. বুঝছো কি? সো কার্ভে যাতে কিঙ্ক কোন সময় না থাকে এটা একটা জিনিস। আর তুমি হচ্ছে ডার্ক যখন করবা স্লোলি ডার্ক করবা যাতে করে লাইনটা অতিরিক্ত মোটা না হয়, এন্ড অবভিয়াসলি তুমি যাতে এখান থেকে সরে না যাও। You don't have to really dark it like that, and it's very important that you always use sharp pencil. I always recommend that you use lead pencils. Lead pencils actually cannot get thicker, but unless you do overlap multiple times, but wooden pencils can actually become pretty blunt after a couple of uses. So yeah, that's my recommendation. And preferably use a 2B pencil. 2B pencils are good in the sense that a little bit of pressure can give a pretty dark line, which can be easily erased. HB pencil is not that easy to erase if you have done a really dark line. I mean, it's going to leave some trace on your paper. 2B pencil is pretty good. If you want to go higher than 2B pencil, they are usually more like drawing stuff. So it's not essential that you have to go for 4B or 6B or 8B. They are not really needed. 2B is good. That's my recommendation. All right, I'm moving on to the next question. Yusuf also said, does the same thing happens in the electron? Chill. In the relative universe, the same video, the relative universe in alpha, beta, or gamma, or is it something like uranium, as it is mentioned to have very small half-life? As shown on the same video, here is the relative elements. No. Here, okay, I totally get this question. Yusuf, hear me out. The question that you asked at 8:22 p.m. I'm discussing that one right now. Alpha, beta, and gamma are called ionizing radiations. They are the stuffs which come out of radioactive isotopes nucleus or radioactive elements. So radioactive elements. Why they are radioactive? Because they produce ionizing radiation. What are the name of these ionizing radiations? Alpha, beta, and gamma. বুঝা গেছে? Alpha, beta, and gamma are not radioactive. They are the output of radioactivity. For example, let's say America produces stupids. America is not stupid. What it produces is stupid. I'm not generalizing here, but like it's not entirely untrue. That's my point. বুঝতে পারছি?
জি স্যার।
Beautiful. It is in the top paragraph from the second, third time in the first sentence. Is the energy ultimately was directly proportional to their frequency? It's not. Well, you have asked a good question. It's not in your syllabus, but I'll still tell you because it's not going to take much time. The energy of a certain wave is actually not measured in terms of energy because energy of a wave is more dependent about intensity. Intensity is given by power by area. So as you go further away from a source, because energy is always spread around in a spherical pattern, the intensity decreases. So intensity is the more appropriate term for the energy of a wave, not essentially power or energy itself. So intensity of a certain wave is directly proportional to its frequency squared. Intensity of a certain wave is directly proportional to its amplitude squared at that location. And intensity of a wave is directly proportional to inverse of the distance squared from the source. These are the three dependency of the intensity for a waves on three different physical factors. You're gonna use them in your AS level, but just because you asked that question, I wanted to entertain this because it's small information. Bolo.
Sir, one question, sir. Sir, I once faced this question, like when it comes to density, I mean optical density and normal density, but there's a question of density. Which density will we take?
Optical density is usually not a term that is
Hello?
defined. হ্যাঁ বলতেছি, optical density is not a term that is defined as a terminology for a syllabus. If you see the term density coming up, it always means physical density as by volume. If they want to mean optical density, they will specify optical density or let's say refractive properties. You have to understand the relevance. If they are talking about density in a wave-based question, there is a likelihood this could be optical density. If they are talking about density in a pressure-based question, there is no possibility it can be optical density. So context actually helps.
I mean, sir, there was a question like light passes through water and oil. So I don't remember it, but which is more or
Yeah, in this case, they might
something
ask
like that,
that
sir.
which of these two medium is denser. This essentially means optically denser because of the context.
So
Because we are talking about one wave going from one medium to another one. We're talking about refraction, where the density actually relevant is for the optical density. Yes, you have to understand the context. That's what I'm asking.
so will it be, sir, oil?
Will it be?
Hello? Oil. I mean,
I have to see the figure, otherwise I cannot tell you.
hello, sir.
হ্যাঁ আমি কথা বলতেছি, তুমি আর আমি একসাথে কথা বলতেছি দেখে মনে হয় তোমার কোনো সাউন্ড যাচ্ছে না। আমার কথা কি ল্যাগ করতেছে?
Yes, sir.
Other people?
No, sir.
ইউসুফ তুমি আইদার একটু দেখো রাউটারের কাছে গিয়ে বসতে পারো কিনা, অথবা তোমার বাসায় যদি কেউ ইউটিউব ব্রাউজ করতে থাকে 1080p তে আপাতত একটু পজ করতে বলো, because these are the two things which are mostly responsible for poor bandwidth for other people. আইদার কাছে গিয়ে বসো অথবা হচ্ছে for the time being ডাউনলোড ইউটিউব পজ করো।
Okay, sir. I'm actually.
আচ্ছা, so এটা গেল একটা জিনিস, and then you ask me another question. The rho is a symbol that the people who was were developing the equations, they chose that resistivity will be also determined by rho. Think about it. I mean, ampere is represented by A. Cross-sectional area of an object is also given by A. But are they the same thing? No. So if I go for similar, for example, meter is given by M, milli is also given by M. Right? So rho is a symbol that is, and if you want to, you have even better example. Let's say, what can I write? Intensity is given by I, current is also given by I. But that does this two I mean the same thing? No. It depends upon the context. If it's a electricity quotient, then rho might as well mean resistivity. If it's a density quotient, then rho might actually mean density. You have to understand from the context. What is a rectifying diode? It's a good question. Rectifying diode is a certain diode which can convert an AC into a DC. Now, there can be two type of diode systems. You don't have to learn both of them for your syllabus. You have to only deal with one type of diode system. যদি তোমাদের কোনো একটা মকে there is a possibility একটা টু ডায়োড সিস্টেম আসতে পারে, ওটা যখন আসবে তখন বুঝাবো। I want you guys to suffer for that question. I hope most of you will. Not kidding.
Rectification full wave এগুলা।
হ্যাঁ, ফুল রেক্টিফিকেশন তো ছিল আছে, বাট তোমাদের হাফ ওয়েভ রেক্টিফিকেশন আছে। রেক্টিফিকেশনের আইডিয়াটা দেখাই। মনে করি এখানে একটা এসি সোর্স আছে, ঠিক আছে? এসি সোর্স আছে, এই এসি সোর্সটা এখানে একটা সিআরও লাগানো আছে, দিস ইজ আওয়ার সিআরও 1, সিআরও নাম্বার 1। আর এখানে আমরা একটা ডায়োড কানেক্ট করলাম, ডায়োড কানেক্ট করে এখানে আমরা একটা লোড দিলাম, মনে করি সেই লোডটা হচ্ছে একটা রেজিস্টার। This resistor might also represent a light bulb, it could also represent a fan, it could be any equipment. For simplicity, we're using a resistor. Let's say here we have connected another CRO over here. Let's say this is CRO2. Both of the CROs are going to measure the voltage variation across this component over time. What you're going to do, what you're going to get, your CRO1 over, let's say this is voltage versus time. Let's say your CRO1 is going to give you a curve like this, because this is the AC supply. Your CRO2 is not going to give you the same curve. Whenever current is going to try to go this way, this current will be allowed to pass. Whenever current is going to go this way, this current will not be allowed to pass, because that's how diodes work. Which means voltage in one direction will be allowed properly. Voltage in the reverse direction will be stopped completely. So allowed, stopped, allowed, stopped. Because the way a diode works, in the forward bias, it has zero resistance, 0 ohm. In the reverse bias, I'm talking about an ideal diode, not practical diode. Ideal, in the reverse bias, a diode has infinite resistance. So infinite resistance. I mean, in the forward bias, it works like a closed switch. In the reverse bias, it works like a open switch. So what is actually happening? This black line that we're seeing over here is an actual AC supply. It looks like AC, it is AC, because it is having two opposite direction. The red line, although it doesn't look like a typical DC that we are used to, a typical DC from a battery looks like a straight line, because it is always working in the same direction. But this red line can be also defined as a DC current, because the whole idea of direct current, DC current is actually a wrong term. The whole idea of direct current is that current should flow in a one direction. If it is flowing, it should be flowing in one direction. But if it is not flowing, no big deal. So what is happening over here? In this case, current is flowing in one direction for half the cycle. And then for the other half cycle, for the remaining half cycle, current is not flowing. But it is never flowing in the opposite direction. So as long as it is flowing, it is only flowing in the same direction. That's why this red line is a DC output. This is what we call half-wave rectification, because half of the energy is allowed to pass through. The other half of the energy, the diode is converting into heat. It is actually eating up that energy and not allowing the current to pass through. This is basically the idea of a half-wave rectification. বুঝা গেছে কি?
But rectifying diode কোনো specific symbol আছে? মানে I think this where I struck. Couldn't recognize the symbol of a rectifying diode. Rectifying diode. Sorry, sir.
বুঝি নাই, আবার বলো, আরেকবার বলো ইউসুফ।
স্যার রেকটিফাইং ডায়োডের কি কোনো স্পেসিফিক সিম্বল আছে
No,
স্যার, নাকি নরমাল ডায়োডের মতোই?
normal diode মতো। A diode that is purposed for rectification is called rectifying diode. Like human doesn't necessarily look like this. Human can also look like this. But they're both human.
Yes, sir.
There can be other versions of human
But
which
both of them are not the
I
same.
could have drawn, but I really don't want to go in that path. I mean, like the whole 99 genders and everything.
Sir, one more question, sir, but I don't think I will be able to, I mean, give it in the Zoom chat. But
বলো
can
বলো,
you
মুখে বলো, সমস্যা
turn
নাই, I
on
can hear
Papa
you.
Cambridge for a moment, sir?
You can ask me directly. I am
মানে
here.
স্যার
বলো।
2020 তে একটা কোশ্চেন আসলো ভেরিয়েন্ট 1 2।
যাচ্ছি আমি, সমস্যা নাই। 2022 মে জুনে।
জি স্যার 2020 ভেরিয়েন্ট 1 2।
S20 মে জুন তো আমি দেখা যাচ্ছে এখানে ডাউনলোড করি নাই, এটা তো তাহলে ভেজাল হয়ে
স্যার
যাবে।
আপনি এটা পাপা ক্যামব্রিজে পেতে পারেন।
আচ্ছা, 1 মিনিট দাঁড়াও, আমি একটু শেয়ারিংটা পজ করতেছি, আমি তারপর পাপা ক্যামব্রিজ থেকে দেখাবো।
আচ্ছা মার্কস কি মনে করছেন স্যার?
হ্যাঁ, এই যে পেপারও এখানে আছে। কত নাম্বার কোশ্চেন বলছিলাম?
স্যার কোশ্চেন নাম্বার হচ্ছে স্যার 16 এ যান স্যার প্লিজ। ও ওয়াও, স্যার আপনি কেমনে বুঝলেন যে আমি পেপার 1 এর কথা বলতেছিলাম?
Because you said 12. Variant 1 to মানে হচ্ছে paper
Oh,
1, variant 2. Question number 16. Let's have a look. The question says that a rocket of mass m, when empty, carries a mass m of fuel. The rocket and fuel travel at speed v. The engine of the rocket is fired and all the fuel is expelled. The speed of the rocket increases to 2v. What happens to the kinetic energy of the rocket? The speed of the rocket increases to 2v. That's pretty simple. I mean, you just calculate at the beginning. You have a total rate at the beginning. Actually, let me just say screenshot this. পিচি কামতেছে।
স্যার প্রথমে মনে হচ্ছে সিম্পল, বাট তারপরে আবার প্যাচ খাইছে অনেক প্রচুর স্যার।
No,
এটা
it's,
হবে,
it's
সেটা হবে
pretty
না,
simple.
ওইটা হবে,
দেখো,
এটা হবে না।
প্রথমে at the beginning our total energy was half into 2m v square. You calculate this becomes mv square. After that, the total kinetic energy would be half into m into 2v whole square. So what do you get from here? Half into m into 4v squared, right? So you get 2v squared, 2 into mv squared. So what is, compare these two numbers, what is happening?
স্যার সি দেওয়া।
স্যার এটুকু পর্যন্ত ঠিক আছে, বাট আনসার দেওয়া সি।
এখানে রকেট বলছে না, শুধু ফুয়েল তো আমরা কনসিডার করবো না।
স্যার
Oh,
প্রথমে তো আমরা
আচ্ছা
আই
আচ্ছা
গেস
আচ্ছা
যদি
আচ্ছা
রকেটও
আচ্ছা
বলি শুধু, তাহলে হাফ বি স্কয়ার আই গেস উই ক্যান ডু দ্যাট। টুটা কেটে
এটা থাকবে না এখানে, এই টুটা
স্যার কি
হবে
করলেন?
না। আচ্ছা মুছে দেই।
তাহলে স্যার হাফ বি স্কয়ার হবে না স্যার, বিকজ রকেট দা ফুয়েল এট স্পিড বি, তো শুধু রকেট
এমটা
মানে হাফ বি স্কয়ার না?
হাফ ইন্টু mv square. So এখানে হাফ mv square হবে। This is supposed to be half mv square. ঠিক আছে, আমি এই পার্টটা খেয়াল করি নাই। This is the key part. So half
আচ্ছা
mv
স্যার
square is the rocket's
একটা প্রবলেম
initial
স্যার।
energy and then it was to হ্যাঁ বলো।
স্যার এখানে তো বলছে দি রকেট এন্ড ফুয়েল ট্রাভেল এট স্পিড ভি, তাহলে যদি আমরা শুধু রকেট বলি তাহলে হাফ ভি স্কয়ার হবে না স্যার? মানে তাহলে 1/4 অফ ভি স্কয়ার।
Half does the, I mean, when you're thinking for half the object, is the speed becoming half or is the mass becoming half?
I guess the speed becomes half because oh
Hold up, hold up. Let's say a train engine with a bogie is going forward at 60 kilometers per hour. If I ask you what is the speed of the bogie, should you say 30 kilometers per hour? বুঝছো কি বলছি?
বুঝতেছি না স্যার।
Both
না
the
স্যার,
rocket and the end and its fuel, both the rocket and its fuel tank, they are moving at the same speed. But if you are trying to find out the individual kinetic energy of the fuel or the rocket, you have to use the mass of that thing exclusively. The kinetic energy of the rocket is half mv square. The kinetic energy of the full fuel tank is also half mv square, because both of them are moving at the same speed. But if you're trying to calculate the kinetic energy of one object at a time, the speed is not becoming half, the mass is. They are moving attached to each other. How can one of the object can have half the speed? I mean, speed is a property that is relevant to its inertia. I mean, half the object cannot have half the speed. That's just not normal.
মানে স্যার আমরা যদি ম্যাথটা কেটেও দেই, include the mass because of মানে দুইটা মনে করেন পাশাপাশি ছিলাম, এখন একটা বের করে দিলাম স্পিড স্যার এরকম তো।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, ওরকম। So they are, both of the objects would be moving at the same speed. Yeah.
স্যার এটা আরেকবার বুঝাবো শেষের পার্টটা।
If you have an object, two objects traveling, being connected with each other in the same direction at the speed of v, if you are trying to find the kinetic energy of this one, you have to use half into this
আচ্ছা স্যার
one's
বুঝছি।
mass into this square, this one. বুঝছো এখন?
জি স্যার।
আচ্ছা very good. তুমি আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছিলে আমি কেমন আছি, তুমি যখন মেসেজটা করছিলে তখন আমি খুব খারাপ ছিলাম, সেটা আমি রিপ্লাই দিই নাই। এখন আমি খুব ভালো আছি, বুঝছো?
সমস্যা নেই।
আমি একটু কেন ছিল যে একটু প্যারার মধ্যে পড়ছি।
আচ্ছা, আবতাহি কি লিখছো? ইটস হার্ড টু ফলো টু অফ ইউ। এটা কি হচ্ছে আমার ইউটিউব,
রকেট
আমার ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ডে ইউটিউব ভিডিও চলতেছিল ওই জন্য লিখছিলা?
জি স্যার।
আচ্ছা, আমি রিয়েলি সরি।
স্যার
বলো।
আমাদের লাস্ট যখন আমরা পড়তেছিলাম লাইক আপনার পিসিতে দেখবেন অনেকগুলো রেকর্ডিং আছে লাইক ক্লাস 3-4টা ক্লাসে, ওগুলো একটু আপলোড দিবেন।
আচ্ছা, আমি আমার জুম ঘাটে দেখবো, সবগুলো আপলোড দিয়ে দিচ্ছি
হ্যাঁ,
আজকে রাতে।
ডাইরেক্টরিতে দেখেন ওখানে থাকবে।
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, আমি জুমে রেকর্ডেড ক্লাসে, ঠিক আছে, আমি এটা খুঁজে দেখে ইনশাআল্লাহ আপলোড দিয়ে দিচ্ছি। আচ্ছা দাঁড়াও, হ্যাঁ মুনাইম, তোমার প্রবলেমে যাচ্ছি, জাস্ট আ সেকেন্ড। তোমার প্রবলেম হচ্ছে কোথায়? ইয়াতে, মেসেঞ্জারে। মুনাইম কোথায়? মুনাইম তুমি কই?
আছি স্যার এখানে, দেখেন তো একটু নিচে দেখেন তো।
আচ্ছা দাও, তুমি আমাদের মানে গ্রুপ চ্যাটে পাঠাইছো নাকি আমাকে পাঠাইছো?
দুটো দিকে পাঠিয়েছি।
ওরে বাবা, এই যে পাইছি, হ্যাঁ পাইছি। মুনাইম রিপ্লাই টু देमसेल्व्स, নো সেপারেট গ্রুপ অল হিয়ার। আচ্ছা, এটা তো ফলো করছিল। কোশ্চেন কি এইটা?
এটাতে মানে বিতর্ক একটু বুঝতেছি না কিভাবে লাগবে স্যার।
এটা বড় হয় না কেন? এটা বড় করে কেমনে মেসেঞ্জার?
স্যার আপনি আলাদা করে মেসেঞ্জার ইনস্টল করে বড় করতে পারেন, দ্যাটস ওয়ান থিং।
না, আমার আলাদা করে মেসেজ এখানে ইনস্টল করা আছে অলরেডি, যেখানে আমার মেসেজ ইনস্টল করা আছে, বাট ওটা অপারেট করতে আমার কাছে বেজার লাগে। এই অরিজিনাল ছবিটা কোথায়?
এখানে আছে, একটু পরে তো
পাইছি
তো
পাইছি। হ্যাঁ বলো, কোশ্চেনটা বলো।
ইয়া 1 বিট হচ্ছে বুঝলাম না এটা কিভাবে হবে। আমি লিখছিলাম, মাইনাস করছিলাম রেডিয়াস গুলোকে, পরে দিয়ে আনসার মিলে না আমার। যে মার্কসিমে দিয়ে কি অ্যাড করছে রেডিয়াস গুলো, এটা কেন?
আচ্ছা বলতেছি আমি। এখানে বলছে হচ্ছে, let's have a look over here. The question says that information about the Earth and Venus are given at the table. So these are the two time duration that both of these planets takes to go around the Earth, and their radius of orbit is given in minute kilometers, circumference given this way. Two tables say as Earth and Venus move in their orbit, the distance between them changes. Calculate the largest possible distance between them. Now try to think about it. What could possibly be for which condition they could be farthest away from each other? Because largest distance বলছে, so মনে করো এটা হচ্ছে সান, এটা হচ্ছে মনে করো ভিনাসের অরবিট, এটা মনে করো আর্থের অরবিট, ঠিক আছে? সো তুমি যদি সাবট্রাক্ট করা মানে হচ্ছে they are closest to each other. Closest to each other means when they are in the same line, and let's say Venus is over here and Earth is over here. This is your closest distance. This will always not be like this, but for this case you will get the closest distance for which you should subtract their radius. If you want to find out the farthest distance between each other, that is the situation for, let's say in another scenario, let's say Earth is over here and Venus is right on the other side of the sun, right over here. In that case they would have the largest distance, তাই না? বুঝছো কি? হ্যালো, হ্যালো,
আচ্ছা শোনা যায়।
মুনাইমের রেসপন্স পাচ্ছি না। মুনাইম তুমি কথা না বললে লিখতে পারো চ্যাট উইন্ডোতে, বুঝে গেছে কিনা? আই ক্যান অ্যাকচুয়ালি। ওকে, বিউটিফুল। আচ্ছা, এটা ছিল একটা প্রবলেম। মুনাইমের আরেকটা প্রবলেম দেখি আমরা। মনে হচ্ছে এটা এখানে 3 তে প্রবলেম, রাইট? B3 তে, কারণ B3 তুমি করো নাই। এখানে বলছে দ্য এভারেজ ফোর্স এক্সার্টেড অন দ্য বল বাই দ্য ব্যাট। আচ্ছা, এখানে অ্যাক্সিলারেশনটা ক্যালকুলেট না করলে এভারেজ ফোর্স করতে পারে। আচ্ছা, এই কোশ্চেনটা একটু ইন্টারেস্টিং। এই কোশ্চেন আমি বুঝাচ্ছি। এটা হচ্ছে আমাদের কাইনেমেটিক্স ওয়ার্কশিটের কোশ্চেন নাম্বার 11। আমি ওই পিডিএফ,
হ্যালো স্যার।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, সমস্যা নেই, আমি শুনতেছি তোমাকে বাবা। আমি এই পিডিএফটা বের করি,
বি
তাহলে
থেকে,
সব, হ্যাঁ
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
পিডিএফটা বের
ওটা স্যার বি থেকে বি।
দেখাচ্ছি। এক মিনিট, এই যে এটা বের করে নিই। The question here said that the cricket ball has a mass of 0.16 kg and it hits the bat with a speed of 25 meters per second. After being in contact with the bat for 0.0013 seconds, the ball rebounds with a speed of 20 meters per second. Now, this is the key part that you have to understand. This is a very unique question, and I really appreciate that you picked up this question. Try to visualize this thing from the side. Let's say this is the bat, cricket bat held by batsman. The ball is coming in at 25 meters per second. Let's say that is our initial velocity u. After the rebound, the ball is gonna get away from the bat. Let's say that is our final velocity. The question says the value is 20 meters per second. Now, if you have a look over here, if I represent this rightward velocity as a positive number, would it be logical to represent this leftward velocity as a positive number? Or because they are in opposite direction, velocity is a vector quantity, if I show this as positive, this should be negative. Which one should be the correct version? Should the minus be there or not there? Hello?
জি স্যার বলেন।
আমাদের এই
স্যার আপনার
মাইনাস,
কথা কেটে আসতেছে।
আমার কথা কেটে যাচ্ছে? হ্যালো?
জি হাফ আসে এরকম। হ্যালো স্যার, জি বলেন, শুনতেছি।
আচ্ছা, বললাম যে this initial velocity is towards right, which is given as 25 meters per second. After the rebound means the ball is now moving in the opposite direction. So if the ball is now moving in opposite direction, the final velocity should be given by a negative sign, because being velocity, they are dependent on the direction. So if this velocity is represented positive velocity, this should be given as a negative velocity. So here comes the idea. If you're trying to calculate the acceleration of the ball, this should be v minus u divided by t, which should give you minus 22 minus 25. This minus 22 is the expected value of v. This minus is from the equation, and u is 25 itself, and then you divide by 0.0013. That gives you the true acceleration of the ball.
Okay.
If you do this, then you're gonna get the correct full marks for this question. But if you don't do this, if you only do 25 minus 22, the CA people said that you're gonna get at least 1 mark because of understanding that v minus u divided by t, but you're not gonna get the full mark. But over here, you're gonna get the ECF anyway.
আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড স্যার,
বুঝছো?
বুঝতে পারছি। আচ্ছা স্যার, আমি যে আগের কোশ্চেনটা ছিলাম ওটা একটু যেতে পারবেন?
হ্যাঁ এই যে আছে এখানে।
এই যে B1 এ যে লেখছি এভাবে লেখলে কি অ্যাকসেপ্ট করবে নাকি আনসারটা হয়নি? দেখেন তো একটু।
Use the information in the tables to show that the Venus is a greater speed than Earth. By using the formula resistance time, then we can calculate the speed of the Earth. Okay, Venus power and speed of Venus. Yeah, this is perfectly good. This is perfectly good. What you did is perfectly good. You're gonna get 2 marks anyway. But if I was answering this question, I would do it this way. If I was answering this question, V Earth equals to BAM by BAM equals to something. V Venus equals to this by this equals to this. Hence, speed of Earth is bigger. I would just show this calculation, not write all those words. বুঝছো?
জি স্যার।
বাট তুমি যেটা লিখছো সেটাও ঠিক আছে, সমস্যা নাই।
আচ্ছা বুঝছি। স্যার আরেকটা ছিল, মানে পিডিএফ যেতে পারবেন একটু 26A তে, পেজ 24 এই পিডিএফ এরই।
Sure, definitely. 26A, হ্যাঁ। On figure 2.1, draw a possible position for the front wheel of the cycle at 16 seconds. আচ্ছা, এটা কোথায় হতে পারে সেটা?
জি স্যার, এটাই, এখানে কনফিউশন।
আচ্ছা, I'll help you. Have a look. This is where a cycle starts from rest, which means at 0 second the speed was 0. He accelerates then and travels at constant speed. At 12 seconds, the cyclist applies the brakes and slow down. Photographs are taken of the cyclist at 4-second intervals. Figure 2.1 shows the results. So here, what you can see over here, take a good look. From 0 second to 4 second, he's covering a distance of 8 meters. Then from 4 second to 8 second, he's covering a total distance of 14 meters. Do you see that 14? 2 over here, 10 over here, and 2 over here. So total 14 meters, which means obviously this gap is bigger. So he is accelerating. In the next 4 seconds, from 8 to 12, he's also covering how many? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So he's also covering 14 meters over here. The question precisely tells us, have a look. At 12 seconds, the cyclist applies the brake. So if he applies the brake, would he be able to cover 14 meter on the next 4 seconds, or should it be less than 14 meter or more than 14 meter? He's applying the brakes over here. At this instant, he's applying the brakes. So that covered distance over the next 4 seconds should be equal to 40 meter, less than 40 meter, or more than 40 meter?
Less.
Precisely. So you find out this is the 40 meter mark. So you just have to draw a mark anywhere earlier than this, because you don't know how much was the deceleration. But because it was a deceleration, you are sure he cannot cover more than he cannot cover up to 40. It should be definitely less than 40. So just give a mark less than 14 and you're good. বুঝছো?
আরেকটা ছিল 22C তে যদি টাইম চেকার কি
22C
জি
দেখতেছি দাঁড়াও।
কোশ্চেনটাই বলতাম না আমি।
As time passes, the planet Venus moves a considerable distance around the circular orbit. State why no work is done by the force acting on the planet as it moves. I said this is pretty simple. I'll help you. The definition of the definition of work is given by this expression. Work done equals to force into distance covered in the direction of the force, which means the force and the displacement, they have to be in the same alignment. Try to understand what happens for a circular orbit. So here is the sun and here is the orbit of the planet. The planet is moving in this way. The force is working towards the sun, which is around the radius. The velocity is tangent with this sun. So the motion is always at 90 degrees with the force, right? This is the force distribution. This is the x direction. I'm talking about instantaneous x. So force and movement, they are not at all aligned. So that's why the total work done by this force is 0. If I was writing this as a 2-mark answer, let me see the context. Okay, I would write that the centripetal force working on Venus works towards the sun, which is perpendicular to the velocity of the Venus, because no motion is happening in the direction of the force. No motion is happening in the direction of the force, because here's the deal. If motion was happening in the direction of the force, this shouldn't be a circular orbit. This should become a inward spiral, right? If the force was actually able to do, because no movement is happening. The force is working, but it is not moving the Venus closer to sun, which means since no movement is happening in the direction of the sun, in the direction of the force, the total work done is 0. First, I'm going to mention the direction that they are perpendicular to each other. Then I'm going to go for the next sentence, that because no movement is happening along the direction of force, the work done is 0. Beautiful. আরেকটা কে যেন একটা প্রবলেম দিছিল, ফাহিম না ফাহিম মুশারফ না কে, আরেকটা কে যেন বলছিলাম আজকে আরেকটা প্রবলেম দিছে, আমি দেখেন আব্দুল্লাহ বলছিলা। আরেকটা কে যেন বলছিলা যে স্যার আমি একটা প্রবলেম দিছি। আচ্ছা যাই হোক, Pulman, thank you very much for your cooperation and staying up for this much long. And we have 2 peer person left the group. Okay, Sabir left the group. Okay, doesn't no big deal. I hope he does really good. He's a really good capable student. আচ্ছা, গুড নাইট। আজকে রাখি। আমি লেকচারগুলো খুঁজে আপলোড করব ডেফিনেটলি। আর হচ্ছে তোমাদের ফার্দার যে প্রবলেম থাকে মার্ক করে রাখো, যাতে নেক্সট ক্লাসে আমরা আলাপ করতে পারি। আর আমি মক স্কেজুলিং পেপার ডিস্ট্রিবিউশনের উপর কাজ করতেছি অলরেডি। সো লুকিং ফরওয়ার্ড টু স্টার্ট ডিস্ট্রিবিউটিং রিলি সুন, লাইক উইদিন 1 or 2 days. So keep your eyes peeled and your messengers open. Allah Hafiz. Good night.
স্যার আজকে কোচিং এ গিয়েছিলাম জানেন স্যার।
নতুন কোচিং এ না পুরান কোচিং এ?
নতুন কোচিং এ স্যার, সোহেল স্যারের কাছ থেকে অ্যাড্রেস নিয়ে স্যার।
পরে কি দেখলা?
স্যার তালা দিয়ে সব বন্ধ করা ছিল স্যার।
কটার সময় গেছো তুমি?
স্যার 1টার দিকে, 12টা থেকে 1টার দিকে স্যার।
আচ্ছা শোনো ওখানে এখন কারেন্টলি থাকে হচ্ছে মামুন আর আমাদের দুজন অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট আছে, একজন মামুন আর একজন জসিম। ওদের দুজনের যে কোনো একজনকে ফোন না দিয়ে গেলে একটা ঝামেলা হচ্ছে যে ওরা দুপুরবেলা লাঞ্চ খেতে বের হয়, কারণ ওদের ওখানে রান্না বান্নার ব্যবস্থা নাই, বুঝছো?
জি স্যার।
মেবি দ্যাট ওয়াজ দ্য মানে পিনাকল অফ মিসম্যাচিং টাইম ফ্রেম।
স্যার আপনাকে স্যার ওই যে নাম্বারটার জন্য স্যার কালকে ফোন দিছিলাম স্যার, ওই নাম্বারটা পাই কাছে চলে গিয়েছিল স্যার, মামুন আঙ্কেলের নাম্বারটা স্যার।
এখন কি নাম্বার আছে তোমার কাছে?
না স্যার, এটা দিতে পারবেন স্যার?
এই যে দিতেছি আমি, আমার কাছে নাম্বার আছে। দাঁড়াও আমি কোথায় জানি লিখছি, এই যে এই গ্রুপে আছে, এই যে আমি
জি স্যার।
ইয়াতে পেস্ট করে দিতেছি, তোমাদের গ্রুপে পেস্ট করে দিচ্ছি।
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
নো প্রবলেম। ওখানে গেলে ওকে ফোন দিও, ফোন দিয়ে বলো যে আমি
জি স্যার।
তরুণ স্যার বা স্যারের কাজে আসছি, কোন দিকে ঢুকবো বা কি, দিস ইজ দ্য নাম্বার হি ইজ অ্যাভেলেবল অ্যাট, ইট উইল ওয়ার্ক।
জি স্যার।
ঠিক আছে, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। আল্লাহ হাফেজ।
আল্লাহ হাফেজ স্যার।